So a few months back, I was recording an episode of my monthly video podcast, Watch Talk Show, with my good friend Mark. We were looking at the different types of watch collectors, their characteristics, collection themes, that kind of stuff. And in a moment of introspection, I asked myself what kind of collector I am. I realized that I've gone, from the time I started this channel, from somebody that collects mostly new watches, right, to somebody that is almost entirely all vintage or vintage inspired. What changed? What led to this? I'm going to share with you 7 reasons today why a lot of modern new post-millennial watches kind of suck. But this doesn't go for all watches. Obviously, sometimes new watches come out and I fall in love, you know? So let's roll the intro and get into today's video. I want to make this abundantly clear that this is not an attempt to persuade people who, for the most part, like post-millennial watches or prefer them over vintage watches to suddenly stop liking them. If that is what you enjoy, then that's great. I'm very happy for you. In fact, if you disagree with my point of view, I'm actually really excited to hear from you. So please share your comments why you think watches post-millennium are better. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. First of all, I'll do a wristwatch check. I'm wearing my Grail hand heart. This, if you've been following me since the start of the channel, was a big grail for me. I don't really wear this often because this is so special. I had the privilege of co-designing this re-release of this classic watch, famously worn by Steve McQueen, and it's the first time I've put it on a NATO. I typically wear it on the Bund strap. But you know what? Riscani Watch Club have done this olive strap with the red stripe, so it fits the red pusher, the red lion, you know, so had to be done. Let's start with the first reason, and that's most people simply can't get the good new stuff. And this might be for economic reasons or just different priorities in life. There's no denying that watches, strictly from a technical perspective that is, have never been so advanced. No matter how they are powered, the accuracy, level of decoration, ways of displaying time, experimental use of new technologies, materials, and mastery over new production techniques has allowed watchmakers to do all kinds of crazy things that the fathers of intricate small-scale watchmaking like Tompion, Mudge, Harrison, Breguet, Lecoultre, Frodsham, Huygens, and even Peter Heinlein himself could never have dreamt of. However, it comes at a price, a very high price. A prime example of this is the previously discussed in an earlier video of one of my favorite releases of last year, the JLC Reverso Hybris Mechanica Caliber 185. Not only are these watches typically produced in very, very limited amounts, but naturally the price is beyond anything I could ever imagine, be willing or able to pay. Even the new electrostatic Extron that I did a video on, perhaps the most significant advancement in how a watch is powered in decades, it comes at a steep price. Of course, Extron have to recoup that investment. So while this is cutting edge stuff, those who truly appreciate horology, it's just simply out of our reach. And that, to be honest, kind of sucks. So this year, the greatest watch brand in the world, yes, we're talking about Seiko. I can already sense the pitchforks, the torches being lit as I say that. But no, seriously, they've come out finally with a watch that I talked about a couple of years ago, but they finalized it, that Constant Force Tourbillon, very impressive stuff, and it's taken Grand Seiko to a whole new level, a whole new league. Very, very cool. But I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, as well as it being, you know, one of the most impressive releases of the year, even if I had DuckTales money, how practical is a watch like that? While I love what it represents and what it can do and the mastery and all the rest of it, the craftsmanship and the engineering ingenuity that has obviously gone on, yeah, could you wear that for day to day? Even if you had DuckTales money? I don't think I would.
So now let's go to life was better before social media, Facebook and Instagram. Huge numbers there from Gen Z.
You can see a majority of Gen Z say life was better before Facebook, and more than a third say life was better before Instagram, and their parents feel even more negative towards it than their children at this point.
The second reason is that watch design was better back in the day. This is far more profound than most newer watches simply being oversized. When you look at the top 50 watches that changed the world book, or if you simply make your own list without the book, most of the important, influential and iconic watches were all of the last century. In fact, everything new, no matter how avant-garde, is based off those designs rooted in the last century. So why is that? Well, it's actually quite simple. This is the century that watches first made the transition from the pocket onto the wrist in the very first decades. Then, from the 1930s to the 1950s, watches began to be differentiated into different genres, such as dress, diver, field, pilot, racing, sports watches, etc. These all came into existence thanks to the miniaturization of components and the specialization that this allowed. Dive watches being the best example, with the advancements in case waterproofing. You could ask, what is the last genre? And perhaps the G-Shock in 1983, inventing what we know now as the beta watch. So last year I did a video on my collecting journey of the Omega Seamaster. And the reason was, aside from owning and experiencing so many, the Seamaster collection is Omega's oldest continuously running to this day collection of watches. And within that, there's such a wide variety. But there's a reason why now, today, after owning, almost every era and example you can think of, I've gone back to the very beginning. Older watches have better authenticity for the money.
And this particular model, being marked Oyster, is extremely, extremely rare. A watch like this at auction is worth about $400,000. Your watch at auction today, $500,000 to $700,000.
If we look at Omega, it's kind of come full circle, mainly thanks to the deep pockets of parent super watch conglomerate, the Swatch Group. For under $5,000, you can go out and buy an extremely durable, highly precise, uber high quality, beautiful, proprietary manufactured master chronometer watch that, on a technical level, is superior to any mechanical equivalent throughout history, and even most rival options on the market today for the same or around the same price.
Omega has reached new standards of precision, doubling their certification with METUS, the Swiss Federal Institute of Metrology. 8 intensive tests are carried out over 10 days.
So why do I own and prefer my current vintage and vastly inferior dated Seamaster? Well, it's a very personal thing. My pre-1957 Omega trilogy is from arguably the golden age of Omega, a time where it was seen equal to the likes of Rolex, but truly independent and making some of the most exquisite, highly regarded in-house automatic movements in the world. Now, I've talked endlessly about the 500 series of calibers, so I will spare you the lecture. So you guys know by now that, well, if you watched a few of my videos, I think it's blatantly obvious that I adore history. I listen to Alessandro Barbero every single day while I'm working. And new watches, although they're undeniably amazing and have never been better, it leaves me a little cold. I feel the historicity, a link to the past. For example, my Breitling Cosmonaut, which I've discussed to death kind of recently, but when I look at that, I am reminded of that exciting era of the infancy of space travel, this wonderful bit of a horological history as well, so I love that connection. Of course, it's not the same for everybody. And this is something I do not get with new watches, I don't get that with a government tracking and eavesdropping device. I'm sorry, Freudian slip there. I mean an Apple Watch. Okay, my fourth reason is the nostalgia factor. Nostalgia has become a massively powerful marketing tool.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Nerd Crew. I'm Mike and I'm what you might call pathetic. My parents tell me to get a real job, but I don't want to.
It's evident that in this online cosplay man-baby culture, that has also in recent years been exacerbated by many working from home or quarantines and the vapidness of social media philistinism that plagues so-called, in quote marks, influencers, a term I personally loathe. The world has become more and more like a Charlie Brooker-esque Black Mirror reality, so a lot of us look back at the past with that fuzzy, warm feeling in our stomach to what seemed to be simpler and happier times.
Lacey is lost. She's lost herself in this world where she thinks that her value is equivalent to her points.
2 stars? 2 stars?
Wasn't a meaningful encounter.
So it's basically the world we live in.
There's a weird unenjoyment of the moment when you're just so focused on what other people are going to be thinking of how much fun you're having.
Everybody's sort of like the star of their own reality show.
Oh my god, I just went to the award show and I face-tuned my face.
Social media is relatively new. It's still an experiment. I think that there is a chance that at some point we collectively will be like, that was a terrible idea, let's not do that again.
That notion of a more innocent purity is a slippery slope, so let's not get too deluded or swept up in the romance of that. Even Socrates complained about the same thing thousands of years ago. It's important not to over-glamorize the past. After all, I would have been dead 5 times over if it had not been for modern medicine. So essentially, I'm kind of living on borrowed time. I digress. This is a subject for a much more profound and probably slightly disturbing video. But anyway, but that does not stop me having quite a connection, that ineffable feeling, an attraction, a special sentimental attachment to certain watches. For example, every time I see a Bond-era Seamaster 300 Pro or a Casio F91W, a vintage sub, etc. These are feelings that I very rarely ever feel with new releases. And don't underestimate that warm, fuzzy feeling of nostalgia. It's a potent and powerful feeling. And especially as we get older, that inevitable realization that our own lives are coming closer to the end than they are to the beginning. Naturally, we want to cling on to what was important, what we loved. And I feel that it's not just with watches. As I get older, I start to realize just, how much better, even cinema, like Kurosawa and De Sica and Antonioni and Bertolucci and all the rest of it, even mainstream stuff like Spielberg and McTiernan and that we discussed in the last video. It seems to be better than all the technologically superior modern stuff that is dumb in comparison. So I don't know, maybe that's just me. Now I'm going to go off on a rant about cinema. Maybe different channel, but you see what I'm saying. There are parallels to other things as well. Let me know in the comments if you feel the same way. Okay, number 5 is what I call the boring design paradox, okay? Yeah, it sounds a little bit pretentious now, I'm thinking about it, but anyway. And what I mean by this is that if we look at history, right, the 20th century, at the end of it, it culminated in ultimately democratization of watches with digital watches and then more recently smartwatches, right? But I can't help but think the new stuff, and I'm not talking about, like super high-end, like a tourbillon inside a tourbillon, a spherical tourbillon like JLC does. I'm not talking about that super stuff, right? Mainstream watches that most people buy, right? It's quite derivative. It's a bit of the same old, a lot of rehashing of the glory days. There's a paradox here which I'll explain in just a moment, but and yeah, you could look at me and say, oh yeah, but the watches you've co-designed, they're very much the same way. Well, it isn't. If you look at the Laurier, we tried to bring a thermally blued hand, affordable Explorer type watch, amalgamation. It was trying something new with the NTH. It broke the record for the thinnest mechanical 300-meter diving pilot's watch. That hadn't been done before. There's always something I like to do new. Even with the Hanhart here, it was about bringing back a classic that was extremely rare to a more faithful size compared to the 42mm, this is 39. So it was always trying to do something new or that people wanted, or, for me, a grail that I've always wanted. It's highly unlikely I'm ever going to find the original like Steve McQueen had, I think only 500 were made or whatever. I discussed it in that video. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the boring design paradox. So let me just explain. So the paradox here is that if you truly want to innovate, you would need millions in research and development. And in the end, the final price of the watch would be high as a result. Again, the new Actron electrostatic watches is the prime example. In the modern world of today, I cannot help but feel that people have become increasingly more self-entitled, constantly complaining online and expecting more and more for less cost, or even just for free.
I think giving this child $5,000 a month, $2,500 a month, $1,000 a month is insane.
I think the best thing would be to start with a job.
No.
Yeah, absolutely,
No.
she needs a job.
No!
She doesn't need a job babysitting, she needs a job in the world.
No!
She doesn't need a job at home, she needs a job in the world.
And any watch, no matter how terrible you may think it is, always requires a ton of investment. So no wonder that brands are often resting on their laurels. It's less risky to do another reissue, or another endless limited edition of something that was successful before. Ironically, whenever you do something new or daringly different, people often hate on it. So it's very much a catch-22 situation. Brands, therefore, are tending to be more like everybody else than ever before. Some of this is due to the fashion watch pandemic that happened over the last decade. Remember the minimal faux Bauhaus trend that still to this day permeates all over the ill-informed influencers on Instagram? Or more recent, the green watch trend of 2021 and 2022. And as I record this, we're still very much trapped in this endless slew of green watches. Okay, number 6, status symbol vulgarity. What I mean by this is that what happens with a lot of the innovative stuff being only available to the high end, it's bought by people that naturally have the money, and they don't typically buy it for the innovation. They buy it as a status symbol. I mean, Richard Mille is a prime example. Is there amazing horology watchmaking going on inside? Of course there is, sure. But most people who buy that, let's be honest, they buy it for the status. They don't buy it for the horological significance. If they really cared, right, about horology, they'd buy some obscure piece, like my little Audemars Piguet pre-Royal Oak Gentry design, extremely rare with that unusual screw-in case back. No, they don't buy something subtle and a story behind it like that is unique. I'm going to change the subject before this becomes a hate rant on Richard Mille watches. This obsession with status symbols is nothing new when it comes to horology. It's not the first time that timekeeping devices have become symbols of wealth and power. King Louis XIV of France with his ormolu clocks, for example, or earlier, the clocks appearing in many paintings of the Renaissance to illustrate the affluence of those depicted in the paintings. You know what happened to old Louis XIV? Well, he got his head lobbed off. Just saying. Talking of influential celebrities, today's paid watch ambassadors don't have the same sense of verisimilitude or coolness as before. Miles Davis with his brightening Navi timer, Arnie with his Seiko H558, or Steve McQueen with his Hanhart 417ES, and so on. These were all personal acquisitions, therefore, and most importantly, by their own volition and choice, which profoundly reflect the tastes and passions and character of the wearer much more than anything that was just simply product placement. So I don't look at Lady Gaga and want to buy another Tudor.
Where else could you see Bon Jovi, Madame Gaga, and the Coldplay under one roof?
That's perfect. See you again soon, yeah?
I sincerely hope not.
Okay, number 7, my final point, and perhaps the nail in the coffin for watches, and that's the death of the tradition of watches. You know, I think back to my parents, and they definitely kind of instilled that refinement of having a decent watch, no matter how much it costs, just a good watch. That refinement, the etiquette, I guess you could say, or the tradition of it. Let's call it what it is. They inherited it off their parents and I off my parents. But what has caused this demise? It's a concoction of, you know, it's a perfect storm of smartwatches, of you know, Instagrammers with their fashion watches, of an industry that is failing to capture the imagination of young people. Then you've got, you know, within the watch world, you have this toxic snobbery that is reinforced by advertising. I was saying before in an earlier video, like the amount of watches being produced each year is diminishing. The amount of smart watches and Apple watches is increasing. Not to mention the counterfeit watches. So there's never been as many threats to traditional watches, and we have to protect it. We have to make better watches. We have to engage and capture the imagination of a new generation. So it's up to us, really, the guardians of horology. It's certainly not, you know, there's no watch journalism left. We've already discussed that many, many times. So it's you and me. I think, what are we going to do? And some of that even leads to what I call new watch fatigue. You know, if I have to hear about what Rolex have released this year one more time, I don't know if I'm alone there. What do you guys feel? Add in the comments your reasons why a lot of modern watches are just ghastly, or don't appeal to you, or just kind of suck. Okay guys, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. As always, I will catch you in the next one. Onwards, upwards, ciao.